What's going on, everybody? Alex here, and today we're taking a look at the Portland Trail Blazers and why they need to make a move for James Harden, even though he's an awful fit with Damian Lillard. The Blazers are now 3-4, and while other contending teams like the Mavericks and Nuggets are also 3-4, their resume doesn't look very impressive. They do have one impressive win against the Lakers when Gary Trent Jr. was out of his mind shooting the ball with 28 points on just 14 shots. Their other wins are a 2-point overtime win against the Rockets without John Wall, DeMarcus Cousins, or Eric Gordon, and a win against the Warriors, who, as I mentioned in my opening day video, are probably not a playoff team unless Steph has a Herculean season. Which, speaking of, is how Steph looked when he dropped 62 on the Blazers 2 nights later in a 15-point Warriors win. And the Blazers also have 20-plus point losses to the Jazz and Clippers. But by far the Blazers' worst loss this season was last night against a depleted Bulls team. Not only is losing after having a 20-point lead inexcusable, this was against one of the worst teams in the NBA, without Lauri Markkanen or Tomas Satoransky. The Blazers have gotten very little production from their front court this season. After suffering a gruesome leg injury last season, Jusuf Nurkic has not been the same player, as he's averaging 8.2 points per game fewer than he did last season. They traded 2 first-rounders and Trevor Ariza for Robert Covington last offseason, but he's only averaging 7.1 points per game, and his three-point shot has fallen off a cliff the past 2 seasons. And other than those two, their depth is razor thin, as they have to start Derrick Jones Jr., who's never started more than 16 games in a season, and is shooting less than 32% this year. It got so bad last season that they had to take a chance on Carmelo Anthony, which has worked out okay for them, but he certainly still has flaws. In reality, this team was probably just overhyped. They're not really an elite team. They did reach the Western Conference Finals 2 years ago, but last season they were well below 500 for the majority of the year. Damian Lillard had an incredible performance in the bubble to get them into the playoffs, but they were quickly dismissed by the Lakers in the first round. This led to a lot of people believing that they would be a serious contender this year, led by Charles Barkley, who bet $100,000 that they would make the finals. Don't gamble, kids. Save your money. Despite being based in a very small market, the Blazers were able to extend Damian Lillard, arguably a top 10 player in the NBA, to his Supermax extension. So if they don't start winning, and soon, there's a chance Lillard will want out. Fortunately for the Blazers, there's another top 10 player in the NBA who just demanded a trade from his team. I think y'all know who I'm talking about. If the Blazers want to get James Harden, it would make sense for them to give up CJ McCollum because there's their only player of significant value other than Damian Lillard, and he plays the same position as Harden. They would also have to give up another player to make the salaries match and multiple first-round picks. This trade here would make sense if the Rockets decide that they want to remain in contention for a playoff spot in the Western Conference. The Rockets team centered around John Wall, CJ McCollum, and Christian Wood has a decent chance to make the playoffs, especially with the new play-in tournaments. We're going to assume that the Trailblazers are ready to move on from Zach Collins because he's been injured a ton, and they already have Jusuf Nurkic and Enes Kanter at center. And the Rockets might actually covet Collins because he's still only 23 years old and he has the chance to develop into a good stretch big. However, as I mentioned in my other James Harden trade video, I don't think the Rockets should trade Harden and continue to try to win, as that would just put them in a spot where they're not able to win a championship and also not getting high draft picks. So if they want to rebuild, acquiring McCollum doesn't make sense, and there would have to be a third team to take in McCollum and give Houston more draft picks. I think the 76ers would be a good fit because, like the Trailblazers, they're in win-now mode, but they're not quite good enough to be considered elite. The Sixers' biggest weakness last year was their three-point shooting, and while they already acquired Seth Curry to try to help with that, McCollum certainly wouldn't hurt, as he's shooting 43% from deep this season and nearly 40% for his career. So in this trade, the Blazers and Sixers would bolster their championship aspirations with Harden and McCollum respectively, and the Rockets would get 5 first-round picks to kick off their rebuild. Since the Blazers and Sixers would be in contention after this trade, their picks in the next 2 years aren't very valuable. So the Rockets are getting picks in the distant future that could be of higher value. The other benefit for the Rockets is that all the players they're getting are on expiring contracts, so they'll have a ton of cap space going forward that they can use to take on bad contracts from other teams and get picks in return. So there is why I believe the Blazers need to trade for James Harden, and a couple of trades that I believe make sense. Let me know what you guys thought of it in the comments section. Don't forget to help this channel grow by dropping a like on this video, and if you want more content like this, subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be dropping a video with my top 10 NBA players of all time, so you do not want to miss that, trust me. And other than that, peace out, y'all.